Hello and welcome to Eat Sleep Code, the official Telerik podcast. I'm your host, Ed Charbeneau, and with me today is my co-host, John Bristowe. How you doing, John?
I'm good. I hope everyone else out there is doing well.
I'm doing pretty good myself. It's the start of the last, probably busy week of the season before things start winding down a little bit.
Yeah, if you got kids, this is just the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, this is the last week of school, last week of any kind of serious meetings for the year for me. Things kind of wind down a little bit while we get ready for the holidays and New Year, and then it's back to work 2021, right?
Yeah, it doesn't wind down for parents, that's for sure. It
No,
certainly just ramps up.
no, yeah, you've got that right. It's, wrapping present time and all that last minute shopping, all that good stuff. Um, you know, good old holiday stuff. So, um, I wanted to bring this up. This is an article I found. This is what we do on this show. We talk about the latest and greatest articles that we can find and things that are interesting to us and discuss those. So I thought I would kind of do a little callback to last week. We did the state of .NET last week,
Mm,
or sorry, state of CSS. My bad. State of CSS. It's a survey that goes out every year, and they kind of analyze different things that are happening in that ecosystem. And I made a comment somewhere about CSS not being a real security risk of any sort. And of course, the internet had to prove me wrong almost instantaneously. So, hackers were able to hide a web skimmer inside of a website's CSS file. I thought this was pretty interesting because until we looked at that state of CSS survey, I really wasn't aware that you could hack somebody's machine through a CSS script. But then, once I started reading the article here, it made complete sense. So, what this is doing is remember that Houdini API we talked about?
sure. Yep.
So the Houdini API was something that we discovered on the state of CSS readout that they compiled, and there was an API in there that lets you kind of polyfill your own APIs in CSS. So it's basically a CSS API that lets you run a piece of JavaScript code that tells the browser how to interpret that CSS feature. And that Houdini seems to be the source of this problem
Okay.
because you're able to run code now from CSS, and if that JavaScript code is nefarious, then you end up with a hacked browser. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So this is a possibility, so it's something to look out for. I thought it was a pretty good read from a security perspective. What do you think, John?
Mm. Well, I think obviously you need to compromise the web server first before you can serve up content like this. You could do it via different types of injection, I guess, but um, thinking other sort of potential exploitable sort of vectors might be like forums don't give you the ability. That was the classic, always the one that people looked at. Anything that allows you to write content, but yeah, I think it seems like a niche sort of thing, but yeah, whatever. It's clever. I like it.
You like it? It's
Yeah, I like it.
that's
I like it.
yeah.
It's
I don't know
interesting.
if that's the spin I'd put on. I like it, but
Whatever. I look. These are all technical problems. It's kind of like, hey, that jigsaw puzzle piece wasn't meant to fit there, but it does, and
yeah,
so that's kind of the part that I like. And I'm not saying I like it like for nefarious reasons, but I like it just in the sense that it's kind of interesting from a technical perspective. Like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So
I know what you meant. I was giving you a hard
yeah,
time.
no
Uh,
worries.
you know, if you put the challenge out there, even though it wasn't like somebody was listening to the show and decided, hey, we're gonna go attack CSS, it's just the mere like putting that into the universe. I think
Sure.
just begs for it to be hacked. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, nobody's gonna hack CSS, and then boom, what do you know? Somebody's done it
Huh.
already.
Yep.
It is 2020. I mean, come on. Um, So this
Look at this
is
moron. Oh, God.
this is a device I just absolutely love, John. Come on.
Yeah. I
You,
don't know.
you don't have one and you haven't tried one, so don't be hating.
No.
Don't be
I'm
hating.
hating for no good reason. That is correct. But I just think, I keep thinking of the Wall-E people when I see this stuff.
So I took advantage of the holiday sales,
Okay.
and I loaded mine up with all kinds of new fun stuff. So I've got Star Wars Squadrons is one of the big ones I just bought.
Okay.
Phenomenal game for VR. Puts you right inside the cockpit of an X-wing or a TIE fighter. You've got like full, 360-degree movement where you can look around the
Yeah, you know where
outside of
else
the
you have that?
cockpit.
Real life.
You
Go
have
take
a
flying lessons.
wow! You have a TIE fighter and an X-wing in real life.
Go
John?
take flying lessons.
Yeah, but you can't shoot at people with
Oh,
with
come
those type
on.
of flying lessons.
How destructive do you need to be? Just enjoy life. Just look around you. It's beautiful.
I love that flex though, John Scott. He's just like, go take flying lessons. Those are accessible to everyone.
All right, all right.
Those are in the relative ballpark of a $399
I don't
VR headset.
I know, but just, get out, enjoy life, play sports. I don't know. That's just
Sports
it's a
ball's
different world
overrated.
for me.
When I can dogfight X-wings and TIE fighters in my home.
Okay.
So
All
this
right.
like puts you in the actual like Star Wars movie pretty much. So if you ever liked watching the movie, now you can actually like participate in the movie. That's pretty amazing stuff. But anyway, people like John like to do things that are not nice, like sue Facebook for this fun stuff.
I'm
This is
not doing anything. I'm just commenting on it.
So Facebook's getting slapped with an antitrust lawsuit over the Oculus because it requires a Facebook account. So it's a
Okay.
Facebook device. It requires a Facebook account for it to work at all. So you can't get into it and do anything without first signing up for a Facebook account. And this is actually Germany that's doing this. I think there's a suit in the U.S. gearing up as well for the same thing. Looks like they're getting hit with, I guess it's a state per state. So 46 of the 50 states are hitting Facebook with a similar lawsuit. So
right.
people don't want their social account attached to this headset for some reason or another. I didn't quite grasp what exactly it is that's making this turn into some sort of a monopoly type of a lawsuit. They're trying to break them up.
Well,
over this.
what's the market share of the Oculus relative to other headsets or whatever you call them,
That's
VR
a
headsets?
Good question. So it's really early in the life of the VR platform itself. So I don't know if there's a lot of numbers out on it.
Okay.
It's something that we'd have to go kind of research and figure out. But apparently it's got enough interest. I don't think a lot of people are a big fan of Facebook in general, to be honest.
Okay.
Especially governments. I don't think they're a big fan of these social platforms. They're coming under attack for a lot of other things to do with elections and fraudulent claims and all sorts of stuff. There's good people that gather in social media. There's bad people that gather in social media, and weeding out who should be able to say what and where has been a big issue in 2020. So I think that's kind of provoking this a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
Now, having not read this, I suspect that the tie-in here is that because Oculus is a popular platform, and because Facebook is a popular platform, and because Facebook owns Oculus or acquired Oculus, that the merging of the two technologies is creating unfair market competition. That's my guess, but yeah, there you go. And just to dig myself a little bit deeper into the Star Wars sort of dilemma, I actually think Star Wars, the Force in Star Wars is lazy script writing. I think the people who wrote the script thought, we'll use magic and we'll just shoehorn magic into everything, and that will explain how everything happens. So there you go for all you Star Wars nerds. I'm more of a Star Trek fan myself, but there you go. So
Star Wars versus Star
hey,
Trek. That's where this
went. That's right. Sorry. So there you go. Facebook, Oculus. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes regardless of what happens. The platform's very cool. I've got my interests kind of divested in my VR stuff. So some of my games are on Oculus, some are on PC. So I've got them kind of mixed between Steam VR and the actual headset itself. That's one thing that's really cool about the Oculus Quest is you can do wireless streaming to it. So you can use your PC to power all of the gaming, and then you just pretty much are streaming the I/O to the device. And it lets you kind of open it up to bigger, better games that you can't run locally on the device, which is really cool.
Fantastic.
So we'll see. Sounds like
I just don't care. I'm sorry. I just don't care. This is like, until it's the holodeck, I don't care. So
this is pretty interesting stuff. You gotta try it out. It's hard to explain until you put one on your face. And then you'll
stop hacking my face. That's what I've always said.
In the meantime, Google can't seem to have decent uptime, it looks like.
Yeah, this was really interesting. So this hit me yesterday. I think it was YouTube, and I got the sort of Chaos Monkey / whatever caricature they're using these days for services down, and I was like, whoa, this is a big deal. So Google never goes down, and so the fact that they did, and they experienced it across the board with all their services, was pretty significant, and everyone kind of raised up their hands. And so this was across the board. This was basically almost every Google service that they have. Incidentally, it was kind of funny. The status page that they had linked to all their accounts was showing green across the board. So that was interesting. But it turns out that it had to do with some kind of auth, that they were some kind of change to their auth that it caused the outage. So, and it was related to the fact that they ran out of internal storage or something like that. So
yeah, how does Google run out of bits?
I don't know. I think it was one of those things where they probably tied it to an account and their auth failed when it tried to allocate something. That's kind of there hasn't been a retrospective written about this yet, so we don't really know the whole story other than it has to do with some internal storage quota issue. I would imagine that they probably just hit a max on a max on their logs or something to that effect.
Interesting. So they ran out of so it's important. The word quota, I think, is important there. So they didn't run out of storage. They just ran out.
No. So these quotas are set up for a good reason. Yeah, these quotas are set up for a good reason, and they're so that certain services don't go haywire in terms of writing and things like that. But
I think I know where you grabbed that idea of it being a log file or something, because if you have some kind of like DDoS attack or something that's happening and somebody's trying to brute force something, you might fill up a security log very quickly.
Sure, there's any number of reasons why this could have happened. So I mean, I don't I just feel bad for the engineers at Google. I know when something like this happens, it's red alert, panic stations. So
yeah. I heard some schools got affected by it. Ours didn't seem to be one of them. So I don't know. It says it was pretty widespread, but I didn't hear our kids talking about it this morning. So,
no, every service like Gmail, YouTube, Google Cloud, everything. Incidentally, you could actually access some of those services if you did incognito. So that's why I was suspecting it had to do something with your auth cookie or something like that. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't notice it this morning myself either. I got on my Gmail and the kids went to school just fine. So
okay, buses didn't stop running, etc., etc. Everything's still working.
Fall from the sky.
Awesome.
It's like a child tearing up a paper napkin situation.
Yeah,
it's a little IT crowd humor in there if you're not a fan. Let's see. Awesome console apps in C#.
Yeah, this was a cute little read, I thought. This is part of their ongoing post-series of a C# admin calendar, and they thought they would write up some of the kind of cool console apps that have been written out there. Not everything's written in Go or Python or Perl or Lisp or anything like that. So these are some of the ones that they mentioned, and thought there were some good ones there. So just goes to show that, CLI console apps are totally feasible within .NET. So there you go.
Yeah. This is a fairly new ecosystem that's kind of springing up, so it's interesting to read here.
Yeah.
.NET
what
command line apps came out with what, .NET 3.2?
Yeah. Yeah, it started adding some support in 3.1, I think, and yeah, it started coming along really nicely. Incidentally, I'm actually seeing a few console apps. A lot of console developers are starting to use Go, the Go programming language for writing console apps or CLIs that I've seen. So, but this is an example of doing it with C#. So,
yeah, so I misspoke. I said console apps. Console apps have been around for an eternity. It was
CLI.
Yeah, like the command line tooling. So
Yep.
global tools is something that
Sure.
just got added recently. So,
Yeah, argument parsing, color support, streaming, all that sort of stuff you need for a good console app.
And the C# Advent calendar that this came from, this is a calendar that Matt Groves puts together from Couchbase. Every year he orchestrates this with the community. It's a really great effort to get new .NET articles out there. And I'm going to paste this one in a chat so everybody can find it really easy. And,
Okay.
this is a good source to get some articles to read throughout the holidays. Maybe you got some time off of work, but you want to catch up on what's happening in the .NET ecosystem. And Mr. Sam Basu, coworker of mine and good friend, he just posted an article today on this as well about exploring Blazor mobile bindings. So if you're into Blazor and doing Xamarin development, make sure you check out what Sam wrote today.
There you go.
He's kind of the expert on all things Xamarin around here, so I'm sure it's
Speaking
good.
of advent calendars, these things are great. They're good for kids to get the chocolates, but when you become an adult, they give you the booze ones, and those are hard to get through. By about day 10, you're like, I'm done. I don't want to drink any more gin or whatever this advent calendar is made of. So
Yeah, last year I got the Rick and Morty sock advent calendar.
Oh, okay.
So that was pretty
so you had
cool.
25 pairs of socks?
No, it was only 12, I think. It was 12
Okay.
the last 12 days till Christmas pairs.
That's a lot of socks, dude.
That's a lot of Rick and Morty socks.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it was pretty cool. I liked some of the graphics that were on a few of them, and I wore them out, so they did get used.
All right.
Speaking of .NET, this was a Code Magazine read. So this one came right from Microsoft with Emo here.
Yep.
And this is talking about the differences in similarities between .NET Standard and what the future of it is with the One.NET initiative. And I thought this was some good information because it answers a lot of questions about how you should kind of architect your applications going forward, what's happening to .NET Standard, and those sort of things. I know that's a question that's on a lot of people's minds. So that got published in Code Magazine, which is a really good magazine that's still in print. I know we saw in 2020, I think it was this year, that the MSDN magazine quit going to print.
Yep.
So Code Magazine, I think, is one of the few that actually does print magazines still.
Funny story about MSDN magazine. I remember buying copies of that thing back in the day, back in the late '90s, and an edition of MSDN magazine. I think it started in '96 or something, if I remember correctly, or something like that. But I remember buying a copy of MSDN magazine here in Australia when I lived here the first time, and a copy of that cost $20. So
Whoa, a
yeah.
copy.
Yes,
Wow.
one edition. So there you go.
Whew. Yeah, all that stuff is online now. I never did.
Hey, come on! I just had to wait 20 years. You know.
Oh yeah, this was a while ago. I can imagine. I did some gaming work back in the day. This is probably about 20 years ago as well. And PC Gamer magazine was really big. And
Sure.
this was when they used to actually like put a physical disc in the magazine. and you'd have like games and content on that
Sure.
disk.
Yeah.
So this was a CD-ROM that was in the magazines. So this was probably around 97, I'd say, 1997.
Whatever. Yeah.
So I did some level designs for the Counter-Strike game, and those got picked up by PC Gamer magazine, and they put it on the CD-ROM. And my reward for that was I had to go buy my own copy to see the content of mine that they published.
Yeah. I remember those. Sometimes they would print out the code for some of those like plugins or extensions or even drivers. Sometimes they would put in the back pages of PC Gamer magazine. I remember that.
Yeah, I was on one of the CD-ROMs. I actually have
Nice.
it hung up in my office here still. But,
Perfect.
Yeah, I had to go to the store and pay out of pocket. I think it was like $9 though. It wasn't like $20. But
A buddy of mine and I used to get all those mags, and we used to collect all the CDs that they put in the back of them. And then one night we were bored, and we decided to microwave them, and just to see what would happen. And I don't know if you've ever microwaved a CD before, but it's kind of cool to watch. So there you go.
Yeah, Progress Software does not encourage
Don't do it. Don't do it.
or approve
Don't do it.
this
Yeah,
behavior.
Yeah. Don't do it. We were stupid kids. So there you go.
Just thought
It
I'd
was fun.
put that disclaimer out there that these views are not.
No, there's look. I was the moron who did it. Come on, there you go. It makes a really distinct smell. So yeah,
I'm sure it does, John.
the burnt plastic smell. So
So what is the VS Code issue tracker?
well, this was VS Code 2020 November 2020 just shipped, and so it's an update. But in addition to that, I didn't realize this was a thing. But basically, this guy named Benjamin Landon, I think his name is, he basically came up with this one pager for tracking issues that VS Code has been working on. And they recently did a huge issue bash, a bug bash, if you want to call it, where they closed off a bunch of issues. You can see it's tracking upward a little bit, but that's fine. That tends to happen. And then you get a big release and it goes down. But yeah, this was just kind of a clever way of maintaining or tracking the issues that they're currently looking at for VS Code.
Nice.
So there you go.
I wonder if there's one of these for Visual Studio.
Yeah, it would be interesting. But this relates to the latest. I think I posted a link in the Trello board. But yeah, there's a new release of Visual Studio Code, November 2020. The release. They've added a bunch of features in there. I'll just quickly kind of enumerate some of them. Word wrap and diff editor, new extension bisect feature, keyboard shortcuts, editor improvements, new Git commands, etc., etc. So worth updating to. So yeah, check for updates, install, be happy.
Yeah, so recently on one of my other streams, I kind of hit my breaking point and pulled the plug on Visual Studio. Too many bugs, too many issues. I can't get anything to work, and spent 2 live streams with the tool just not working, nothing working in it. False positives on errors. You compile and it says there's an error, but there's not really one.
Sure, yeah.
Plugins not working, so Visual Studio extensions that worked before don't work now. It all added up to 2 streams back to back that I couldn't get any work done on. So I'm going to be switching over to Rider, it looks like, in the short term, see how that works out for me, and probably some Visual Studio Code as well to kind of evaluate my exit strategy.
Both are good. I will say that it won't alleviate the pain you've experienced. I've seen that occur on VS Code myself. So
more VS Code stuff. What is the Cake VS Code extension?
Oh, so Cake's Octopus deploys the backer of this project. So Cake's is part of a build orchestration process that incorporates a bunch of tasks and a whole bunch of extensions and plugins and such, and it's a wonderful tool, and we love it at Octopus. And so this is their 1.0 release of their VS Code extension. So you can now run tasks within VS Code that will kick off Cake. And so if you're using Cake, this is now integrated within VS Code, which is awesome. If you're not, you should check it out. You can find out more at cakebuild.net. And just another tool in your arsenal, so to speak.
The cake is a lie, John.
Sure.
Only Portal players
Yep.
understand that one. Let me guess, John, you don't play Portal either.
No, but I know what you're talking about. So yeah.
This is a Visual Studio Code extension that I saw a good friend of ours, Burke Holland, tweeting about this morning.
Yep.
I thought this was pretty cool. So JavaScript has this really annoying feature where TypeScript as well. In C#, if you want to use string interpolation, you just use the regular quotes and you escape it with the $sign.
Sure.
And it kind of does the concatenation of whatever variables inside of that thing. In JavaScript land, they had to make sure that you had to use a special backtick quote instead of just the regular quotes for some reason. It probably just goes back to some legacy thing that they needed to do this for.
Well, strings can be represented in both ways that way. So
yeah, but you have to use the backticks in order to use interpolation.
So it provides an escape hatch for processing. Yeah.
So what this plugin does is if you mistakenly use the double quotes, which most of us do probably out of habit, in muscle memory for just using them for the last 20 odd years, this will automatically tell that it's like Clippy. It's like, hey, I see you're trying to use string interpolation. Would you like me to change those quotes for you? And it just comes in and changes the quotes to backticks when it recognizes that pattern of string interpolation. And then there's some additional flags that you can set to help with some like React style inlining of these things with components and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. So I thought that was interesting.
All right.
It's the little things that make it better.
That's right.
It's kind of like death by many cuts, but in the positive direction.
Yeah, anything that can help your coding, I'm a big fan of. So,
Screechrat's asking about my mid-century VS Code theme. That is still something that I'm debating. It depends on how Visual Studio the team decides to start addressing some of these bugs. I'm kind of giving up on VS for a little bit. I'm frustrated with it, and I'm trying to use it on live streams, and it's doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and I can't live stream anymore with it. So I may support that later. I'm not quite sure yet. So with the latest update, they broke all of my VS Code extensions, not only ones that I use, but my own as well. So, I've got two that are completely, I wouldn't say completely unusable, but the theme is pretty badly broken. There's a lot of styles that it broke, and I need to go in and see if they have variables that I can set for those new screens that they created or whatever they overrode. I can turn it back on, and then my Blazor snippet plugin that already had an issue completely stopped working. So I've kind of been dead in the water on that one as well.
Sucks.
So
someone moved the cheese.
They did more than move the cheese. They broke the cheese.
They ate it.
They hid it underneath of a rock that I can't get. It's a black box to me. It's not a problem that I can resolve myself. So I have to go to support. And that support ticket has been sitting there for about 3 years, and nobody's touched it. So
awesome.
Assuming that nobody's going to touch it. So anyhow, last thing we've got up for grabs here. This is one of your threads, I think, here, John.
So this is McLaren Stanley's sort of, I guess, tale of woe when he was at Uber, excuse me. So he decided to leverage his alcoholic abilities with a glass of whiskey and share a tale about when he was at Uber, some of the challenges they had with their app. And he articulates a journey of switching from, for example, Objective-C to Swift, and how you had these two camps within Uber, basically trying to say their dad can beat up your dad, etc. But it's a really interesting tale about some of the limitations that Uber fought against relative to iOS. Build times were long. App sizes were huge because Uber had all these rules. Because Uber's a global app, it has all these rules associated with car pickups, etc. Like, for example, certain cars in certain airports can only use cash, or certain cars can only be used at a certain time, etc. So they had all this. They had this massive rules engine, which just bloated out the size of the app. They had to do some ungodly hacks, like they had to relink the application after builds, not manually, but they had to write some tooling to do that. Just some ungodly things they had to do to just squeak it under the app limit size that Apple had imposed. I think originally it was like 100 meg, then it went to 150, then it went to 200. So he just went through. He articulated basically all the things that Uber had to go through to basically build an app for iOS back in the day when iOS was kind of like in its under its growing phases, which was iOS 8 to 9, etc. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really, really interesting just to look at how a company like Uber, with hundreds of developers, with millions of dollars, still fights with and wrestles with a lot of the issues that we just deal with if we're on smaller teams, or et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's just like the build times were ungodly, apparently, inside of Xcode. Like, you've got a bunch of people banging on a code base. Apparently, Xcode does not scale very well. So my sympathies to you with your experience with VS right now, but honestly, it doesn't compare to Xcode, apparently, according to McLaren. Apparently, Xcode would just, you type a character, you'd have to wait 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi for it to actually show up within the editor. So there was just a lot of issues that he articulated in this thread, and it's a fascinating sort of read about what they had to go through at Uber.
It wouldn't surprise me, John, if Uber's backend was a giant Excel spreadsheet. It wouldn't surprise me. Nothing surprises me about corporate level development practices.
All right. Well, apparently they had some really smart people working on this stuff, and they had to do some. It was mostly, I think they were wrestling with Xcode, and they had this contention, if you will, between the Objective-C camp and the Swift camp. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because the Objective-C purists were like, well, to get under this 150 meg, 200 meg. Their build sizes, their executable sizes in Swift were 1.4, 1.5 times larger. So there were some issues there. Build times were massive. They had to do relinking after builds just to make things kind of smaller. And, so there's just some really, a lot of heavy lifting went on. And I love reading stories of people achieving the impossible, meaning, you don't just stop when the tool vendor says that's all we can do. You keep going. You hack. You basically make it work. You force it. It's like the frogwa of technology. You just stuff a bunch of things down the throat and you say, "Listen, you're going to build, and we're going to get you underneath this 200 meg limit, no matter what."
That is quite the analogy, John.
Sorry, I had nothing. Sorry, just the first thing that came to my mind. So, but yeah, it's kind of the same thing.
About a series. I'm going to see if I can find it. Here it is. I have it. If you go into YouTube and you Google war stories.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've seen this. Yeah.
These are fantastic. And they're up the same kind of alley as this, this tweet goes after. So the Mist one is fantastic. If you want to start with one that's really interesting, watch the Mist one. So it talks about how they had all of these issues fitting the content on a CD-ROM because CD-ROMs were brand new at the time.
Sure.
And they had all of these images, graphics, videos and things that had to go on the CD. And it wasn't performant, and there was all these kind of hoops they jumped through.
Sure.
They went as far as to writing the code in such a way that it would put it on the CD in a certain order, so the seek times were shorter. I mean, they really, really over-engineered this.
Yeah, micro optimizations. Yeah. So they would write to parts of they would write to quote inaccessible memory, and they would throw things into parts that you shouldn't do. They would discover APIs that shouldn't be used, etc. And they would just write to parts of memory just to get things loaded. This is not just missed, by the way. Everyone did this because of hard limits on the Dreamcast, because of hard limits on whatever console they were targeting. We only had 4 bits to represent an 8-bit RGB value, so we crunched it. It's like stuff like that. So yeah, this is the stuff that I love. And it's not just game developers who have to face this. There's tons of different scenarios where you have to encounter these things. So the .NET team has encountered this. The Go team has encountered things like this. There's just any number of stories where people are like, listen, we can't make it work. Well, let's keep going. Let's see what we can do. So
these war stories, by the way, are by Ars Technica.
Yes.
So they're really well done, produced. And these are, big names or big titles that you would be familiar with if you've done any kind of gaming over the last, probably 25 years. Prince of Persia was another excellent one. Just kind of the grassroots that took place to make this thing happen were really cool to see. I think it was the guy's brother that he filmed on camera to make he's like, I'm not an animator, so I got out my camera and we filmed him, and then we traced his outline. It's really cool to see all of the outside the box thinking that went into into that Prince of Persia game.
Yeah, we've all been there. I remember back in the .NET 1.0 days. I know I'm talking a lot about .NET, but I mean I've been doing a lot of .NET programming historically, but I remember reading how XML serialization worked, and it wrote to a temporary location on disk. And so because we weren't seeing it serialized anywhere, we thought it was in memory, but no, it just wrote to a temporary location. So we went to that location, looked at it, and then discovered that it wasn't serializing certain types a certain way. It had to do with the way in which certain properties on a type were the protection values. So if it was protected versus public versus private, they would serialize out differently to disk. We had to go to that level where I think we had some of the sys internals tools running. We had to run FileMon to see what was actually happening. We had to interrupt the serialization process because it would blow away those changes, for example. And so we had to stop it in process and then say, okay, let's grab the file, copy it somewhere else, look at it. Oh, it's not serializing the way we expect it to. That's why we were getting errors. This was for an API that we were building because it was doing automatic XML serialization of types via SOAP. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting. So we all have those war stories. Certainly not to the level of writing 4 bits, 8 bits. We had to sort to some temporary memory location. But yeah, we've all encountered that, and Microsoft also has its stories as well. I mean, I remember, the introduction of generics was a bit of an issue, for a lot of developers, especially at the MSIL level. So yeah, just a lot of interesting stories going on with technology, and it's not always magic. Sometimes it just really sucks. Sometimes you have to really fight some of these hardline battles, and so McLaren Stanley's retrospective on what happened at Uber, I think, is fascinating.
Yeah, I've got a lot of those stories that aren't software related too. Working in manufacturing for many years, writing software in that environment. I've got some of the most absurd human resources type stories. So office politics.
Okay.
I should have a whole podcast just dedicated to old man rants on
Okay.
all the bizarre things that I had to deal with. One of the things that I thought was absolutely hilarious is when I was a young engineer, they had at the factory I was working at, it was an ex-military government factory. So they would build a lot of military contracts, and it was people that would come out of the military would run this factory. So there was a lot of things that came from military influence that kind of ended up in the books of this place. So they had a spreadsheet in this joint that told you if you were at this level of, they had numbers assigned to everybody. I think Microsoft does this, a lot of big companies do, but they assign a number to your rank and status in the company.
Okay.
So this is a very military thing, though. You're an E, whatever the numbers are. I can't remember any of these things right now, but they would have these same type of ranks that would go on inside the factory. So if you were a level X, you got this many square feet of office space. And that meant you got this many floor tile rugs in your office, this type of phone, your computer was this size and, or price or cost out. So they had this very like detailed matrix of what you deserved for your wonderful status within the company. So, it didn't matter what kind of work you were doing. It just mattered, whatever your quote rank was. So I was a young engineer, and they put me in charge of calling vendors like Intel, big companies, and doing reports with them when there was material that we received that had some kind of RMA necessary, like there was a problem with it. Say we got some processors in or some EPROMs in, you had to call Intel and say, these are defective for X reason. So it's me and another, engineer on the phone discussing, very detailed specs on these parts. And they put me, because I was this entry-level engineer, they put me in between the loading dock and a break room and gave me no office at all. So I'm sitting literally like in the open with a desk.
Sounds like an episode of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, so I'm in the open in a desk with a phone, and I've got loading docks, these big rolling gates opening up and trucks backing up and unloading product. And then to my left, there's a break room with people eating and cackling all day long. And I'm trying to talk to like Intel and AMD and stuff on the phone, and nobody can hear what I'm doing. So I complained. I was like, I need an office, some cubicle walls to kind of buffet the sound from all this stuff going on.
Sure.
And the HR lady, she gets out her book and she opens up the matrix. And she goes down and looks, and she's like, well, you're an engineer, something, junior, whatever. You're a 22, and a 22 gets no office. And I was like, oh, okay. So why that matters, I have no idea. But she just completely shot me down. So my dad was he worked at General Motors, and he kind of taught me the people that you keep close are your maintenance folks, because they can pull strings for you. So I always brought donuts and things to these maintenance guys, and kind of kept them in my good graces. So I wouldn't complain to them, and I was like, they won't give me a cubicle. And is there anything you guys can do? And they're like, no, we need an order from HR. Try hitting them up again, and then we can see what we can do. So I went and I bothered HR again. I'm like, look, I was like, this is what's going on. Explained my case again. The lady opened up her book again, and she was gracious enough to make a concession, and gave me one cubicle wall.
You mean like a divider?
So those cubicles that they put together.
Yeah.
They're portable cubicles. They can put them together, tear them down, move them around.
Sure.
They give me one wall. So the maintenance guys come down. They're laughing hysterically with this cubicle wall, and they're like, "Yeah, we finally got your order in for your office." And they set the wall down and let go, and the wall just goes poof. Because these things, they're meant to be, think of like building a house of cards or something, or Legos. You need to kind of have multiple pieces for this to actually function. So they kept standing it up and watching it fall over and just laughing at it. So they called the lady down, and they showed her, like, you need at least 2 of these to make a corner for it to stand up on its own. So she's like, all right, fine, 2 walls. So they waited till she left, and they're like, all right, we're going to hook you up now.
Okay.
So they went off. They found every bookshelf that they could find in the entire facility and brought them down and built this fortress of bookshelves and anything that resembled a wall shape, and just made this massive office for me. So it was like the Taj Mahal of knick-knack pieces of stuff.
I was gonna say it was more like those forts you built as a kid in your living room out of cushions. But
Yeah, exactly. And at the very corner of it, of course, is the two cubicle walls. The rest of it is just these giant bookcases that they stole from all the old offices and stuff that nobody used anymore.
yeah.
They had a riot building this because they knew how absurd it was that this lady was telling me it could have one or two walls. So they had fun with it. They didn't care for this person.
That actually relates to a story related to software development, which is, when you define an interface, be it COM or Java or what have you, there's what's called the two cubicle rule, which means basically when you define an interface, it's immutable. You can't change it. And the two cubicle rule refers to you can only change it and impact people who are only two cubicles away, because it requires massive redeployment and changing and breaking and stuff like that. So basically, if you're going to change an interface, you have to make sure that people impacted by it are no more than two cubicles away. So that's known as the two cubicle rule. It's like the two pizza team, basically. So everything comes in twos. It's binary.
Yeah. So I had the two walls. That was the two wall rule.
Perfect.
And she was mad. She was furious. But they followed the rules. It was two walls, and she said two walls. So she did not backtrack.
It's not two walls. It's not two walls, Ed. It's two rooms with one wall each.
Yeah, it was hilarious though. I mean, you've got a book that has like the number, like if you're inside, like if you're not on the factory floor, if you're inside like the office area, they would actually count the number of drop ceiling tiles you were allowed to have. It was the most bizarre thing. You could have, 8 drop ceiling tiles and 8 floor tiles and this many walls. I mean, it was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. But getting this giant office built for me out of bookcases was even funnier. So, where there's a will,
somehow
there's
this
a
all
way.
relates to Uber, but yeah.
Well, I mean, we're talking about these war stories.
War stories,
and,
yeah.
While they're not all software related, there's other shenanigans that you have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
To go back to this one last comment here is, if there was only a medium, John, that didn't make us use 250 characters to do something like this.
Hey, dude, it used to be 140. So,
If
back
somebody
in the
could
day.
come up with a platform
Yeah,
that,
unroll
say,
it. Just unroll it. It's easy.
has...
Yeah, at the bottom, I think some people asked for an unroll of it, but I just wanted to mention it on the Twitters there, so to speak. But
No, this is good.
yeah,
This is good stuff. I was kind of relating to this. Like, we all have these crazy stories about something or another that we've dealt with.
absolutely.
All right, John, I will cut it there because like I said, I could make a whole show out of these goofy stories that have happened.
Sure.
Just dealing with office politics and whatnot over the years. So thanks for joining me again, John. We'll
Sure.
see everybody throughout the week here. Code It Live, we've got shows tomorrow through Thursday or Friday. We've got Blazer Power Hour on Wednesday. TJ's here with the React show, and Alyssa with the UI show. So it's like a Web Wednesday. Make sure you come in, tune in for that, and we'll see you on those shows. John, I'll see you next Monday. Have a good week, and take care.
All right.